All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there, and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Dan, one of your hosts here, and good friend Sam, you know, Miss CFC Central, back in the chair with me as well. And look, we are going to be talking about this Brighton match coming up on the weekend. Chelsea's return to Premier League football after a midweek antics, excitement, advancement in the Carabao Cup that allows us to see ourselves into a round that Manchester United definitely will not see this season. But we're going to talk about what's going well for Brighton, what's not going well. We're going to take a look at Maresca's challenges upcoming with some of the player availability. We'll get into our on the ledge predictions and look, there's been so much rotation at this point, Sam. I mean, I feel like the on the ledge piece is less on the ledge because, I mean, everything is just kind of happening at this point.
Yeah, I mean, just heading into the festive calendar, it's always going to be a lottery in terms of, who's the fittest and who's not injured, basically. So, could be a few surprises, curveballs coming our way, but we try to do our best. We try to stay on top of the instability and the rotating chairs and the rotating cast that happens in these situations. But here's to hoping it's not as bad as what we put out against Brentford, and we essentially go for the jugular. I really, really think you have to get some kind of a result here. Brighton have, the Seagulls have not been kind to us, and we've tried to put that record straight in recent games. But when it comes to this particular one, you have to snap that 3-game winless run and get back on track. It's very important because other teams tend to be picking up steam. We've also had, according to the fixture calendar, the second easiest fixtures in the first five. So now it gets a little difficult. So hopefully we'll pick up the pace.
That would be absolutely delightful, considering this is also a Brighton team that had a bunch of fun in the midweek, unlike us, pumping Barnsley 6-0. Quite the drubbing as they punched down and advanced their ticket into the next round of the League Cup as well. I mean, for Brighton, just to kind of maybe set the stage again for a couple of their recent fixtures, if you haven't been paying attention to them beyond that 6-0 victory. They did have a 2-2 draw on last weekend against Tottenham, which we'd kind of been hoping, I think, for a Brighton win in the moments there. It did not happen. They lost 2-1 to Bournemouth before that. They had the 2-1 victory over Man City as well. They also had the Oxford United 6-0 thing. So that might just be a part of their League Cup run story at the given time. They ended up losing rather to Everton 2-0. They had the 1-1 draw against Fulham, and that's been their season so far. So if you look at it kind of a form perspective, start the season with a draw, go to a loss, go to a win, go to a loss, go to a draw. Where does that put us, Sam? I feel like does that put us back on the win trajectory for Chelsea here? Can we just like write in the W and like walk away from the 90 minutes of football and just agree that we should get the 3 points?
I mean, if I tell you now, nobody's going to listen to the episode. So I'm going to keep my cards very close to my chest and
Oh,
just
okay.
say that
The
it's
magic of production. Very good. I appreciate that.
hey, you've got to build the suspense throughout the episode. So, I'm going to do what I believe I'm pretty good at and just say that there is definitely a chance. Brighton themselves have had, a couple of interesting results, and Matt Law essentially said very, very nicely in the last podcast. If you've got a chance to listen to it, great. If not, please go and listen to it after this one. But he just said, Brighton are probably one of the most, Houdini act kind of teams in the Premier League. You see them go and beat City, and then they lose to something like a Burnley. So you just can't tell. And there's a lot of moving factors with their injuries as well, but just like tried and tested personnel not working out, not firing as well as they would have liked. So I would say it presents an interesting opportunity, but hope for the best and plan for the worst would be my mantra going into this particular fixture.
I mean, both sides, Chelsea and Brighton, kind of in a couple of injury situations. I would argue that we are in the deeper injury crisis than Brighton at this given time, considering, again, the long-term injury to Levi Colwell, Liam Delap not being available to late November, Cole Palmer and his hamstring consideration, Benoit Badiashile not being available at the moment, Romeo Lavia not being available, Wes Fofana has kind of looked like his fitness is maybe still suspect at this point in time. So plenty of considerations for Enzo Maresca here, in addition to just the general potential risk of overuse of players given the proximity and quick turns in some of these fixtures here. I mean, obviously had a chance to rest Joao Pedro in the midweek, didn't have to play Moises Caicedo. So, I mean, there have been some positive things. On the Brighton side, Sam, as you take a look at their injuries, what do you want people to pay attention to? What players, by not being available for Brighton, do you think is going to have the most critical impact into how they're going to approach this game?
Yeah, the big one for me, Dan, is the fullbacks. And they lost Pervis Estupinian, who was their first choice left back for a bit, got injured, was sort of playing himself into fitness, and then they realized that they probably could go for a better player. But they bought in Ferdi Karaoglu, who's a Turkish left-sided defender, and they got Maxim Bikoipa from the Belgian league. So they've tried to reinforce that left hand side, but Ikoipa's been he picked up a knock in between. Karioglu looks like he's unfit. He played against Spurs and that didn't look very good. So we'll talk about it in the weakness. So I think the left hand side in terms of defense is definitely a big issue. Jack Hinchelwood, who is a central midfielder, usually plays at right back. He's also apparently injured. We've not had a chance to see, I think, the press conference as of now, but if he's out, then you have somebody like a Joel Veltman coming in at right back, and he's not first choice anymore. Obviously, seasoned campaigner, but not really first choice in terms of what Brighton want there. So the fullbacks definitely big worries from what I can see. But everything else looks good and essentially just what they would want in those particular positions.
So, again, has been some changeover in leadership here. And so, I mean, I think a lot of people remember, De Zerbi on the sidelines, not there. So, can we just walk through maybe the evolution in this side of play and, how I think ultimately they're kind of getting into football now? I mean, the Houdini Act is kind of an interesting idea to frame this as a bit of magic that has had to occur to make some of this shift and to maybe tie together or stitch together a team that isn't necessarily or has not necessarily been invested in and in the same way as a Chelsea or a Liverpool or other teams.
Yeah, I think the initial plan from Fabian Hertzler was not to try and, upset the apple cart. It was just try and build on De Zerbi's ideals to go from what was working for him and just like build upon it, make sure the evolution wasn't revolution in that sense. So De Zerbi used a lot of, 3-4-3 or used a lot of 4-2-3-1, different systems. So the ideals were also trying to keep the ball, try to bait the opposition into creating what we call false transitions and make it look like a counterattack even though you have the ball. So it was all about luring, provoking. It was trying to offer those traps and get players to commit before going out and exploring. I think that has changed a little bit. Now it's gone from trying to keep the ball and being a little tricky to just moving it as quickly as possible. It's gone from what you would imagine is an Italian manager's wily tactic to a German manager's work hard, press hard, go vertical. So there is now a standard 4-2-3-1 that they're using. Fabian Herzler is a proponent of risky, adventurous football, and he's quite like Nagelsmann in terms of what he likes. He's somebody who's not very intent on midfield. He just uses it to progress the ball as quickly as he can. At times when you saw his Brighton side last season, there would be nobody in midfield, just a vacant pivot, and he would try to just overload the last line, and he uses that to distort and manipulate the final four, the final five, to try and create issues there and opportunities to score. So Nagelsmann also loves that, did that a lot at Bayern. So that's something that he excels at. But I think that's what's changed, going from that identity to maybe a little more, you know, rapid, vertical, quick transitions, and using the pace and the youth that he has up front to try and get in behind. Obviously, he has some really good attackers at his disposal, so just feed them well, supply them constantly, and you'll get the goals firing.
Well, we're going to take our first ad break. When we come back, I would love to get into the strengths of this team in the sense that you talked about of how they've been able to kind of stitch together some of the action here, how they've evolved over the last season. But we're going to again do that after this ad break. So stay tuned. Be right back. All right, Sam. So I know you love to do it in the way of building back to front talk me through, I guess, maybe first the defense, what is or isn't working there. I mean, you mentioned it earlier just on the changes of the fullbacks, I think being a kind of critical element within how this team plays. And, while it may have been a strength or is potentially a strength, the player availability does kind of, I think, constrict how good that grouping can be.
Yeah, so I think in defense, when you look, Bart Verbruggen at goalkeeper is pretty much the same guy. He made a pretty sizable error against Cole Palmer, the goal that he just basically dropped at his feet and it rolled in. But overall, I think he's a pretty good keeper, good with his feet. That's what De Zerbi wanted, to try and get somebody who can play out from the back and be that extra outfielder when required. But defense, when you look at it, the fulcrum there is exactly the same when we met them last season, Dan. It's about Louis Dunk and Jean-Paul Van Hecke. And Van Hecke is consistently one of the Premier League's best progressive passers. He can also carry the ball really, really well. But I think what makes him such a devastating threat is just the fact that he can take the ball and hit a diagonal or hit a pass back to front very, very quickly. And he does it consistently well. So that's something that you have to be careful about when the side is in a little bit of disarray. He will take that opportunity to stride forward and hit it as quickly as possible to the options up front. So he's somebody to watch from a passing perspective. And obviously you've got to complement that from just making sure that you've got some kind of defensive resilience there. I mean, Van Hecker is no slouch, but in terms of just box defending, being very good in the duels, ground and in the air, Lewis Dunk is, that rock at the back, just very good at doing composed defending, getting the ball clear from the box. Great positioning, excellent intelligence. Apparently a Chelsea fan as well, so I'm not surprised. But yeah, very very seasoned campaigner, lots of experience in the back line. So that essentially is the fulcrum. It's remained the same. And I think you've got that consistency to play for, I mean, at 100 plus games, I believe. Then you forge a really good partnership and, you build from there. The fullbacks we've already talked about. I think that's the quite interesting bit for me. But De Kuiper is somebody that I was watching very closely when we were in the market for a left back, and he was creating quite the waves in the Belgian league. And for Club Brugge. And from there, it was just, getting into the national side, offering what he could. Defensively, he's quite good, but I think he shines when he's in advanced areas. He offers a lot of supporting runs, will offer a lot of attacking thrust, end up in good areas, get you some good goals, some good assists. So he's somebody who was bought in to I would say, mimic a little bit of Estupinian's strengths, but Estupinian was a machine before his injuries going both ways. So that's a bit of his, early Premier League days there for De Kuiper. On the right hand side, we talked about Josh Hinselwood. So he's a central midfielder, somebody who's by trade supposed to be in the middle of the park, but he was moved to right back and he's done very well there. Defensively, very solid, got great work rate, but he offers a little bit of tactical flexibility. He will invert sometimes into midfield to offer a little bit of an extra hand if Baleba and Ayari require it. Sometimes he'll function, as a conventional fullback, hold width, but a lot of the times he underlaps into the box and offers those very wily runs from deeper areas, which are very hard to track for the opposition winger. So he's got the industry, he's got the will to sort of make those runs, get into the box and find good targets in those areas. So that's the difference between the fullbacks. I think the left side would be quite, adventurous. Will try to get into good positions if possible, and the right will be a little more tricky and a little more difficult to figure out. So if he's out, Hinchelwood, Veltman is quite, very, very experienced as well. Has been playing there for a long time, but I think he will offer just slotting into the third, a centre back slot, offer a little bit of defensive resilience and go from there. I don't expect him to bomb from back to front and offer what any of the other fullbacks do. So that's going to be the defense. In midfield, you've got a pairing that again played against us in the reverse fixture last year. So Baleba and Ayari, they've continued since we met them. So I would say Carlos Baleba is one of my favorite midfielders to watch in the Premier League. Very, very good in every sense. I think he's just an excellent all-round threat. He's able to offer great progressive strengths. He's got a very nice pass on him, with his left foot. can spin and hit balls behind the last line. There were a couple of times against Spurs where he was just able to take the ball on the spin and hit through balls multiple times for Yakuba Minte. So passing wise, he's going to be a threat. He's also very athletic, so he can carry it in tight spaces. He can also track back. He's, like I said, just athletically very gifted. So he will offer defensive thrust also, gets from point A to B quite quickly. But unfortunately, I think because of the Man United saga that happened, there's been a little bit of turbulence in terms of settling down again. I think his performances have been, I would say, below average of late. So he's still on his days, just a great midfielder to watch, and he will offer some very sizable strengths there. His partner is Yasin Ayari, who I believe, if I could compare him, would be probably similar to a little bit of Sandro Tonali, I would say. Somebody who's a more progressive, box to box kind of midfielder, will offer a lot of good, well-rounded strengths in every area, but he's best at carrying the ball. He's best at like positioning himself into advanced areas. Cracked a really, really good goal to put Brighton like 2-0 up against Tottenham, and had a lovely, lovely game there as well. But just somebody who will go back to front, uh, basically just offer the kind of balance that you need next to Baleva. And both of them are a quite mobile pivot. They will be able to offer just well-rounded strengths back to front. They will offer pressing. Some of the times you will also see them provide a lot of supporting runs. Baleba will end up at the edge of the box. Ayari will end up at left wing, supporting the overload. He will try and offer an extra option. So the pivots have basically a lot of freedom. Like you mentioned, Hitzler doesn't really want them to have static positions. He wants them to like push, support the attack, basically try and create issues for the last line. So the midfield there will be interesting to watch. It can be a good thing for them, but also a double-edged sword because we'll talk about it in the weakness. But yeah, mostly they will be there to try and support the attack and try to connect from back to front in the best way possible.
And then I think attack is going to be one area where, I mean, look, you don't score 6 goals against a team and not have a way to score, or don't have attackers necessarily, but they are a team that has been stripped a little bit in terms of the player availability. I mean, we took Joao Pedro this summer. Evan Ferguson ends up leaving. I mean, so there have been a bit of, or has been rather, a bit of rebuild element to this attack. I mean, obviously, someone like Matoma is still available, who's been kind of a consistent thorn, I think, in a lot of Premier League sides, particularly defenders, in what he's been able to do. Why don't you walk me through just how that attack is looking, and where maybe the strengths are in that attack if they're not necessarily perfect?
Yeah, I would like to clarify the 6 goals that they've scored are both in the EFL Cup against Barnsley and I believe
Hey,
Oxford United.
okay,
So
but we only scored 2. So just to be fair, like, I
mhm,
mean, some teams were scoring 6
yeah,
goals, some teams were struggling to score 2. So just
yeah, I
again,
know.
I want to
The only
compare a
time, the
little
only
bit.
time, the only time I've seen Lincoln Park and not enjoyed it. So yeah, it was quite a
Gosh.
hard watch, but yeah, but I mean, it was quite nasty to be honest. But yeah, I mean, Diego Gomez is somebody who played in that Barnsley game and ended up scoring 4 goals from right wing. So there are murmurs that he might start this game, so we don't quite know. But the one thing that I would point out, obviously, everybody knows this. We've basically stolen Joao Pedro from them, and he was essentially the easiest, just their best attacker and somebody who's able to stitch that front line together. We've seen him when he plays in that number 10 role, he's able to just drop, weave, and intricately bring other players into the fold and try to create some really nice sequences. So that's been a little hard for them to cope with that loss. Evan Ferguson's decline has been really sad because he went from being essentially a 100 million player to just struggling to even put performance into perspective. So he's left the club. I think he's gone to Serie A, Roma. But you've got now Danny Welbeck who's leading the line, and he's almost 35 in less than 60 days. He's 35 years old. He started I think more than 2 or 3 games, but he's not lasted after the 60 minute, 61-minute mark. So if he does start, you have to just try and bear him out for 60 minutes. But he's somebody who functions like what we want Joao Pedro to do, but he's a little more stronger at it. He's well attuned to doing it, I would say. He's very good at dropping deep and connecting play with these one-touch passes, but he's also something that Joao Pedro doesn't do. Just able to chest ball down and hold center backs off. He bullies that back line as much as possible, and then he'll do those secondary knockdowns for the other attackers to try and get the ball, recover the ball, and then break from there. So he's something that you would want ideally for a Joao Pedro, just a nice physical foil to give him that protection and somebody to occupy the centre backs, but also offer great movement in the box. He's had a habit of scoring against us, some real heartbreakers in there. I believe he scored after the 90th minute in a particular fixture, and yeah, he's just going to be a threat inside the box from set pieces, from getting into the far post just unmarked and getting your header there. So one to watch in that number 9 position. But the other guy who's played there is Jorginho Rutter, who's also somebody I've really liked when he was at Leeds. Against Tottenham, he was able to just drop, disengage a lot like Joao Pedro, I would say, would try to drop to either wing, drop very deep, try to link up play as much as possible. Again, had a very nice through ball where he turned around and played one of the attackers um, in behind the last line, and I think that's a feature for Brighton's attack. They have wingers who are very good 1v1. So it is the only position that I would say is other than the centre backs that's fixed. So you've got Mitoma on the left hand side, you've got Yankuba Minte on the right hand side. Both of them are very good 1v1. Can offer you a lot of threat from those wide areas when they're isolated, but they're also very good at coming into the half spaces. Minte, especially, he would be my danger man here, Dan. Like somebody who's just very capable of game breaking abilities. He essentially scored. He just gave us like that hiding that we got in that 3-0 defeat last season when he scored two. And I fully expect him to be very dangerous here. When he comes into the half spaces, he will try to play 1-2s with Jorginho Rutter or Welbeck, whoever it is at the number 9 position. Um, he's also allowed to switch sometimes, so he will go from right wing, sometimes end up in the center or even on the left hand side. Same with Mitoma. So watch for the runs. I would say whenever Welbeck or Rutter drop from the number 9 position, Mitoma and Minte are going to make these diagonal runs in behind. So whenever these center forwards drop, watch for the run, protect it. Minte's pace is absolute venom. And when he gets running, he's very difficult to stop. Very tricky 1v1 in the box. You don't want to do too much against him because he can get those fouls and penalties against you. So I think that's going to be the issue. It's just getting that number 9 to drop or use him as a reference point, go back to front very quickly, either diagonal to Minte or Mitoma, or you just use the number 9 as a decoy and find those runs in behind. So it's going to be a big game again for the centre backs.
And then maybe as we start to take a look then at the flip side of the kind of team here, what are you seeing in terms of the weaknesses and where our Chelsea team, our beloved Blues, might have an opportunity to cause some issues, cause some drama with what's going on? I mean, I think that, you mentioned a little bit about some of the defensive elements. I think that could be very interesting. The fullback element based upon availability sounds like it could really be an issue. And I mean, we probably have seen a couple of things in a few of these past matches that when you're winning and then you end up drawing, they definitely could argue that maybe you're not the most stable side in the Premier League.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the fullback. So, I mean, we'll start from there because we've mentioned a bit, but watched the Spurs game for this one, and Kadioglu was just really bad there. Obviously looked quite unfit. I've seen him play when he's at full fitness, and he's quite a player. Like he offers you the ability to invert. He can offer you, these surging runs from the back. He can cross. He has a nice pass on him. Also quite two-footed, so gives you that kind of purpose from left hand side. But it didn't look very good in that particular game, and when he came up against Kudus, it was just he looked like he was scared. He just didn't want to engage in those particular situations. So I think if he does start on the left hand side, then you've got essentially a way in. Try to get him 1v1. Who we have on the right wing. We've got Pedro Neto, we've got Estevao. So if there's the chance to get 1v1 with him, just just do it as much as possible. I think you will get some really good moments out of that. So he's one to target. And we talked about Hinchelwood being a central midfielder, so not really accomplished 1v1, or when he's in transition moments can be a little vulnerable. But if he's not available, then Veltman obviously can also be somebody you can target. I think he's also in those transition positions, somebody you can look at and say, yeah, we'll take a run at him. And if there's Gitten, Garnacho, whoever it is who starts on the left, you've got pace to burn, then you can cause Brighton's defense a little bit of issue. So that would be my fullback related issue. The second thing is something that I mentioned also with Hertzler's um, weaknesses when we talked about this last preview. It's the high line, and you can cause an issue there because Van Hecker is quite quick, but Dunk at 33 is not. And there are a lot of interesting occasions that came up against Man City and against Spurs where he had to try and push up very high. So Dunk at chance like certain positions because there was a little bit of double width going on where Pedro Porro was pushing up and trying to hold width, and you had Lucas Bergwall, who's the right-sided number 8. Dunk was forced to try and push up on Bergwall because his left back was trying to keep a little change on Porro, and that created a lot of issues because Dunk didn't know against a quicker, younger player whether he should be tight or whether he should just be a little more conservative. So Dunk could be an issue in that high line. He's an excellent defender. He's very, very clever, very intelligent. But if you get him in those high positions where you're getting somebody to drop and pull him out of that line, that could be how you make things happen. And I would look at Joao Pedro trying to drop into those positions. Richarlison, when he played for Spurs, he was dropping on both sides, but when he did drop on the left hand side, even Van Hecker sort of had a problem with him. Just the physicality, a couple of times got it back to goal and was able to turn Van Hecker quite easily. So I would say both centre backs have struggled a little bit defensively, but speed wise, Dunk is somebody that you definitely should exploit. We unfortunately don't have Joao Pedro in terms of a centre forward who can sprint in behind and offer you those runs. He's quick, but he's not quick enough. So you would probably want Joao to drag him out with those positionings that he takes it from number 9. He would just drop into those midfield areas and open up those runs for somebody like a Garnacho, somebody like a Gittins, somebody like an Estevao, and try to play the ball in behind. That would be something that I would look to exploit, especially against Dunk. The third is there were a lot of issues that came positionally from the pivot. We talked about how the midfield is afforded a little bit more degree of freedom in terms of pushing up and supporting as much as possible. So you would want to try and overload the midfield as much as possible. Baleba and Ayari have sort of gone through issues where they've tried to basically try and push up a little too much, and there's been a massive gap between them and the defensive line. And that's where a lot of players have dropped in and picked up nice positions. Tihani Reinders also picked up some nice positions in behind the second line. So you can exploit the gap in there. And I believe the pivot also can be dragged out to one side. If you overload the left hand side, there were a lot of times when Baleba and Ayari ended up on the same line, and that left spaces in the middle of the park, usually just in front of the defense, edge of the box, for somebody like a Bentancur to receive and get shooting opportunities or switch opportunities away. So I would say even that is possible. It's a very athletic midfield, but it's also one that it thrives on a little bit of chaos, loves pressing, has to be, very lively, has to go up and down. So there will be moments where you get to exploit that kind of midfield positioning. A lot of positions that are there in between those last two lines which you can exploit. So if Enzo Fernandez starts and if he's at 100% fitness, which at this point in time looks very dubious, then I would ask him to be that person who's able to offer that. So one other way that you can use him, Dan Enzo, is a really nice way that Spurs used Lucas Bergwall, which was to try and use Kudus to pin, the opposition fullback on that side, the left back on the touch line, and that get Enzo Fernandez to try and pin the centre back. So Bergwall was just standing on the last line, and if the fullback committed and went out wide to Kudus, then that would leave him 1v1 with the centre back, and if Kudus was able to sort of get more spaces one by one, then he would come inside and get shooting opportunities. So you could use Enzo Fernandez in that role also. Get him into those underlapping positions. Get him as high up the pitch as you can. Get him in that right-sided role that he likes to play, and try to create issues from there. So if Enzo is fully fit, then I would definitely expect him to be the change maker in this one.
All right, well, we're going to get our last ad break out of the way. And when we come back, we'll talk about the issues for Enzo Maresca to solve. And boy, oh boy, I mean, I wish he had a healing touch because he could solve a whole lot of them if that were the case. But we'll talk about what he might be trying to fix heading into this fixture. So stay tuned. We are back. All right, Sam, your opportunity to flip the script, to throw a couple questions my way as we try to think about what Enzo Maresca is going to be doing differently with his approach to this game to make sure that Chelsea pick up maximum points.
Okay, this one might involve a little bit of guesswork, but last time when we played them, Dan, we were expecting them to come with a back four, and Brighton rocked up at home with a back five, and it was a 5-4-1, and we lost that game 3-0. So same manager, same managers on either side. So do you
Mm-hmm.
think there's maybe a possibility that he realizes, Hertzler, that Enzo Maresca does struggle against back fives, and he switches to that? Or do you think this is Brighton thinking, hey, we have an opportunity to play our own game and go to Stamford Bridge and get a result?
Oh, I kind of think that based upon availability, because I think you would consider making a formation change if you felt like Reese, Caicedo, and Gusto were all 100%. And then you could do our like fun little thing where you put Malo Gusto in and then you push Reese into midfield and you have them there with Caicedo and you have kind of some rotation here. And maybe you are able then to give minutes back to, Andre Santos at some point. I don't think the team's fitness is at that level. So I think it's going to be a fitness guided formation with a guidance towards trying to be able to combat against the players that, in terms of, or maybe rather the combat against what the expected lineup might look like from the Brighton team. And so I'm not necessarily sure that like he's going to have a ton of ability to adapt what the side looks like. I mean, we did see in that Lincoln City game, I mean, some rotation. I mean, obviously, Ty George starting up top and Buonanotte starting, in the 10 spot gives you kind of thought that maybe there is some level of kind of rotation here. But look, he played Malagusto for the full 90. He played, Drill Hato for the full 90. And I would imagine that means you're going to see a back four still, and it's going to be Reese. It's going to be Trev again. Tosin probably comes back in for West, would be my guess. And then Kukurea starts. And I don't think he's going to adapt more beyond that. To me, I think, flipping it a little bit, I think the midfield kind of question. I mean, obviously we saw Andre Santos start. We saw Enzo Fernandez play. I mean, he ultimately gets, subbed off. It feels as if, I mean, Caicedo comes in off of rest, which is phenomenal. Does Enzo Fernandez start in midfield? I'm going to guess the answer is yes, but I mean, does he try to find him some opportunity for fitness? Could be a question.
I mean, we've speculated on the curveball, so I really don't know. Enzo doesn't look fully fit. A lot of people have pointed that out. I mean, on the review polls, even Matt wasn't happy with the fitness. It looked like he was a little slow. So maybe there's an option that he ends up with Reece James in midfield. I don't know. I really don't know what Maresca's thinking after the Man United game. I just really don't know whether to pinpoint something and have confidence in it, because he does look like he's maybe second guessing a certain number of his decisions in terms of personnel, in terms of what he wants to do tactically. So um, I think obviously when you look at it, you need to have Enzo and Caicedo there. That's your tried and tested kind of route. But obviously, if Cole Palmer isn't fit, then you might have to move things around a little bit. And then again, availability wise, you have all sorts of questions. So that actually gives us a nice segue into the next question. Now, Estevao interestingly, just we expected him to start, but do you think it was an indication that Palmer's injury is a little more, you know, serious than first figured? Because we expected him to be there against Lincoln, get some minutes in there, didn't start. So do you expect him to be thrown on from the start, or are you seeing another bench appearance?
That's a tough one. I mean, I really feel for Estevao. I mean, obviously he was going to get that big opportunity, and then the Rob Sanchez card hits. My guess is I think that he starts. And I think that he starts because I don't know if Gittins has necessarily landed a lock spot. I mean, Pedro Neto comes in off the bench, so it feels like who rested was essentially the like, I don't really want to have to play you, but if I play you, like you essentially are a couple of my starters for the match over the weekend. And so my guess would then be that it is, Pedro Neto and Estevao as your two starting, kind of wingers here. I think he also could go super crazy depending upon what happens with who's available. I mean, you and I have talked about it a little bit. Does Garnacho go up into the 9 spot, and then does Joao Pedro kind of sit behind him in the 10? There's a lot that could happen with this attack heading into this game, and so I think if you want to talk about what could be interesting, like that would be a very interesting thing for Enzo Maresca to do. I know that we view him as generally kind of risk adverse manager, but when you don't have a lot of players available, you kind of have to make do, and that could be one route that he takes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question for me. It's, trying to figure out which is the lesser of the evils. Do you play João Pedro as the nine and see him perhaps be in that position where he's up against two very physical centre backs and very good pairing, like very accomplished pairing? Or do you drop him to his favorite 10 position, but then you have to put Tyreek George at centre forward? So that's again going to be, I think, the big toss up. I know which one I prefer. I wouldn't prefer either. I would prefer somebody else to take that number 9 slot and try to give Joao what he needs in that number 10 position, especially when you don't have somebody like a Cole Palmer. But I do feel if you have to go with maybe a Garnacho, an unfit Garnacho, somebody who's just played 60 minutes after 143 days, I believe. So that's a long time, a quarter of one third of a year basically without playing that amount of minutes. So he's just getting back to fitness. Gittins has looked a little out of sorts, might have a little joy in this game because there'll be space to exploit, especially against a weaker fullback. So I don't know if that ties into Maresca's thinking, but Estevao has showed that, he's got a lot more to offer. I think on that right hand side, where he will be up against what I believe will be the weaker fullback, there's a lot that he can exploit. He did very well against West Ham. I think he will be very, very good here as well. And I do believe that he was being saved for that reason. Just knowing that, you don't want to risk goal. You want to go with a very sizable right-sided position. So maybe he starts there and Pedro gets, on the left, like Pedro Neto gets on the left wing. But again, he's somebody who's also looked a little jaded. So who knows? Like it's a complete Rubik's cube for me. It could go either way. And we could just be flipping all night long and not get to the right place. So I'm hoping he does. I'm really hoping whatever combination he chooses just turns out to be the right one then.
Oof. Well, it does feel as if that leads us to then the on the ledge and kind of final predictions that we have for this one. So, look, we've been on a bit of a skid here, Sam, in terms of trying to predict accurately what happens in these games. Would you like to try to put us back on the right path here?
Mhm. Oh, wow. Not under the cosh at all. Absolutely then. But yeah, I think this could be a game where I probably see Estebao get, a goal. I'm not going to say an assist. I will say a goal. So I will go for an Estebao goal from the right wing, or even the center, wherever it is that he's played. So that would be my safe. I was slightly safe on the ledge prediction. But if I had to go for maybe a more adventurous one, then would probably say there would be at least 7 or 8 yellow cards in this game.
Ooh.
Mm. So
That is
that would
that's
be
a
my
fun one
honorable
there.
mention. Yeah, what about you? Do
Um,
you have a exciting one for me?
oh, I mean, well, first off, do you have a prediction? Is it a win? Is it a loss? Is it a draw and a score? Do you have that as well?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was right about the Bayern one. My head was like right about that, and I was scared to predict a loss on a Chelsea podcast. So I would probably say this. My head seems like it's going to be a draw here, but I will go with my heart again and say let's go for a narrow 2-1 win. But it could also be a draw. I do feel I'm leaning analytically towards a draw, but I want to go with
Yeah.
something I want to manifest. So,
I
what about
believe
you?
and hope your manifestation is right. My thought was going to be a kind of clunky 2-2 draw was where my head was at,
Hmm.
with one of those goals being a own goal that we help walk
Ooh,
into the back of the net. Was going to be my
interesting.
yeah, that's kind of like I just feel like this team is set up for some like wonkiness right now. And so I'm trying to
Hmm.
think about what would be something that we wouldn't necessarily expect. And just some of the passing patterns between the defenders recently and how we've kind of been exposed have led me to believe that that is been a bit of a challenge. I will also assess that this is. I'll also give you another one. I think this is the game where Reece James gets back involved with a goal. It's been a long
Hmm.
time, and we need
I
to
mean,
see.
it was a cracker that he scored on the first day of the season. If you remember that long range strike in that 3-1 win, I think Kai Havertz and
Yes,
Timo Werner made their PL debut. Absolutely beautiful goal. So maybe serendipity here, and we're hoping that he gets one of those crackers away and essentially puts us in a very good spot. And so more power to you.
look, I think we would all love it. We would all appreciate it. I mean, we are happy that he has an assist on the board here, right? So he matches his assist total from last season, which was one in the Premier League. It's been a long time since that 2021-22 season where he had 14 goal contributions in the league, 5 goals, 9 assists. He has one so far in 5 games. Let's get him a goal in this one, which would match the number of goals he had in the 22-23 season. And then also the last season, 24-25 season. Let's just get back to get back to 5 goals this season. That'd be great. That'd be a great
Mhm.
return for Reece James, who's I think been, effectively managed by Enzo Maresca to at least be available more regularly, which is the start. Now we need some of those performances where he's not just contributing from a defensive standpoint, he's getting back into the offensive element of the game as well.
Absolutely. I think you do want to get those contributions in from fullback as well. Kukureya, I mean, we all play fantasy Premier League here, but yeah, Kukureya's numbers compared to just the underlying numbers compared to last season have also dropped off a cliff, and he's not making those positions, that left-sided position. He had a good header on the right-hand side, but not really getting into those scoring positions that he was. I think confidence also plays a big role here in terms of just pushing up and knowing that you have, the freedom to get into those scoring just spots. Like the instinct is there because he's a midfielder by trade. But yeah, I think it's nice to be able to add at least 5 or 6 goal contributions from either flank, and then you can look at overhauling that last goal tally that we had last season, which is clearly about a good 12-15 short of where we need to be. So you need to get Reece James scoring. You need to get Kukurea also into the mix. So hopefully it starts from here then, and
Well, yeah. I mean, the
starts
thing
off a good
with
run for us.
Yeah, and the thing with Kukurea, remember last season, 7 goals and 3 assists, 10 goal contributions across almost 3,800 minutes and 41 starts last season. So,
Hmm.
I mean, there's plenty of time, there's plenty of matches, there's plenty of opportunity for him to get involved. Remember, 3 of those did come in the Conference League. So, if you just want to, take that back, you can make it 7 total goal contributions across, the other fixtures that he was in. Just kind of putting that one out there. But look, that's going to do for this one. So we've left some on the ledge predictions. We've given you some predictions of what we think the scoreline is going to be. We've talked about the strengths and weaknesses of the team we're facing and some of the biggest headaches that Enzo Maresca is going to have to solve for. But that is our match preview for the Brighton game coming up this weekend. We will be live on YouTube after the match, so we'd love for you to join us there. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the content, and also leave wonderful comments hitting that bell icon to get notified on YouTube. You can give us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We always appreciate that. You can join us in Discord in a free or paid capacity. And don't forget to sign up for our free weekly newsletter, The London Blue Dispatch, written by the wonderful Sam, who's been my co-host on this episode. But that's going to do it for this one. So until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.